Hi everyone, Ashley here and welcome to another video on the Penguin Palace Stamps YouTube channel. Today I have a fun, colorful Easter card to share with you where I made my own patterned paper background using a bunch of small stamps from the My BFF stamp set. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm starting by making that background I mentioned, and for this I took a few different small images from the My BFF stamp set. And this is one of the new stamp sets from the Spring 2020 Penguin Palace Stamps release. So this stamp set has a bunch of really cute small images in it, as well as some bigger ones to assemble fun spring or Easter themed cards. So I just took a couple of the Easter eggs, a little butterfly, and then a couple of the little flowers, and I assembled them all in just a little bunch of images on my acrylic block. I can then take some black ink to ink them up and stamp them onto my paper. As you can see, I've just cut down a piece of white paper here to use as my background, and off to the top left corner there, I've also gone ahead and pre-cut some of the other pieces of paper that I'm going to be using on my card. This is a large piece of gingham cardstock that I'm using as the background, sort of like a border, and I just thought that would be nice for a spring kind of feel to the card. I then cut out a piece of pink cardstock to act as a border for the white piece. I'm going to go ahead and speed up the video here so you can see the stamping come together a little bit more quickly. Basically, my technique for this is just to build up and kind of rotate the series of stamps every time I stamp it so that it's not just the same exact orientation over and over, but you get a bit of variety in the direction in which the stamps are facing. If I did have a couple of empty spaces left over, I didn't worry about it. I just went back in with the single egg stamp after and filled in those spots. So that at the end of the day, I got a fully completed card front using all of these different little images. I'm now going to go ahead and use my Copic markers to color in these images. And for each of the little images, because they're so small, I ended up just using 2 shades of Copic marker, just to add a little bit of shading and dimension to each one. So for these flowers, I'm using a slightly darker yellow and then a lighter yellow to blend it out. And I'll do the same for all the other images too, with a darker shade and a lighter shade. I'm going to go ahead and speed up the video here so you can watch the coloring come together. If you don't want to watch the coloring, do feel free to skip ahead in the video, but also feel free to watch. Either way, I'll see you when the coloring is done. Okay, so now that the coloring's all done, it's time to assemble the rest of the pieces of the card. So I'm just stamping 2 little bunnies here and a sentiment, and those both also come from the My BFF stamp set. And I knew that I wanted the sentiment to be placed across that card panel and the 2 little bunnies to be sitting right above it. So I'm stamping these out in some black ink, and I just made sure to stamp that sentiment strip along the bottom of the cardstock so that all I have to do is come in with my paper trimmer and trim it down to be a nice little strip. And that'll be the sentiment strip that goes across the front of my card. I just double stamped them to get a nice, clean, crisp image, and I'm going to go ahead and color in these bunnies, again just using my Copic markers before I cut them out. And to cut out these little bunnies, I used the coordinating dies that come with the stamp set. And all of the stamp sets that were released as part of the Spring 2020 release by Penguin Palace Stamps do come with coordinating dies, which is really helpful. So like I said, I went ahead and cut out those bunnies as well as the sentiment strip. And I wanted to give the sentiment strip a little bit of extra dimension, so I'm just gluing it down onto a piece of pink cardstock that's the same color as that border that I cut out for the patterned paper panel above. And this way, that little sentiment strip will also have a pink border. So I just glued down that white piece onto the pink paper, leaving a little strip of border across the top, and then I'll cut it down along the bottom to create the same width of border. I'm also cutting the edges of that sentiment strip into a banner. So for that, I just cut a little notch down the middle of the edge, and then I can cut in from the corners to make that banner shape. And when I did that here, I realized that one side was a little bit longer, so the sentiment was a little bit off center. So if that ever happens to you, it's a very easy fix. Just cut a little bit more down the middle there, and then cut in from the edges again. And this will just shorten down that banner to make it more even. So the next step was to start assembling the card together. So I took my gingham piece of paper and just added some liquid glue to the back so I could glue it down onto my white card base. And the good thing about liquid glue is that it's a little bit movable, so once you stick a piece of paper down, you can kind of shift it around to make sure it is perfectly straight on your card base before it's fully adhered. I'm doing the same thing with my patterned paper panel that I made here, where I'm just gluing it down with some liquid glue onto that pink paper to leave a little bit of a border around the edge. And I just thought this was a nice finishing touch. And finally, I can then adhere that piece down to the card, leaving that gingham patterned paper around the border and having the patterned paper piece right in the middle. I'm just really pressing down to make sure it's well stuck down onto the card base there. Okay, so now it's time to just assemble the rest of the card together. I took some foam squares and tacked them onto the back of that sentiment strip, and then I removed the release paper. So now I can use my craft tweezers to make sure that strip is fully straight and aligned on my card front, and then I can stick it down. And since it has the foam squares behind it, it will have a little bit of dimension and elevation, which I thought was really fun. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with these bunnies. So I'm just cutting down some foam squares to make sure that they are nice and evenly placed on the back of those bunnies there. And then again, I can take my craft tweezers and place them on my card in exactly the position I want. And I love craft tweezers for this reason. It lets you kind of get your fingers out of the way and align your images right on the front of your card exactly how you want them to be. So again, I'm just adding some foam squares onto the back of this second button, removing the release paper, and then I could adhere it down onto the front of my card. And they're just right in the middle there, right above that sentiment strip. I'm adding a few finishing touches onto the card just to add a little bit of extra sparkle and interest. First, I'm adding some sequins. So I just took a few multicolor sequins that I thought matched the colors of the card nicely and kind of scattered them all over the front of the card and adhered them down with just a little dab of liquid glue. I'm then taking my Wink of Stella glitter marker, which is just a clear glitter brush pen, and adding a little bit of sparkle onto those eggs. So I just went through all the Easter eggs and added a little touch of Wink of Stella. Since this is clear, it won't change the color of the eggs, it just adds a nice sheer shimmer. Finally, I took a bottle of glossy accents and did the same thing. So I added a clear layer of glossy accents onto all the Easter eggs, and this just gives them a shiny look of dimension. And my bottle of glossy accents actually broke, so the nozzle was gone. So it was a little bit of a thicker nozzle than I was used to, which meant that some of the glossy accents kind of squeezed out to the sides, but that's okay, it's not that big a deal. So that is the finished card for today. When I kind of rotate it in the light, you can see the shine and shimmer that you do get from those sequins, as well as the glossy accents and the Wink of Stella, which do just give it a little bit of an extra touch. So thank you so much for watching today. I hope that you enjoyed watching the making of this card. If you want to see more cards, do head over to my Instagram account, which is linked up below. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye!